Hi, I'm Danielle The Clay Lady. Welcome to my studio on the Clay Ladies campus in Nashville, Tennessee. I've been teaching the Clay Lady Way since 1982, and the heart of the Clay Lady Way is the kids can make and paint in one sitting, and then when the project is bone dry, you dip it in a clear glaze, wipe off the bottom, set it in the kiln, and do a single firing. I'm going to show you that process just so that you can feel comfortable knowing how to glaze a project that has not been bisque fired. So the reason why glazing a bone drying piece for a single firing works so well with the Clay Lady Way is I teach you how to make the projects thick as an Oreo cookie, and you put it together with clay glue or with a wet toothbrush. That makes the piece really strong. Now, if your project was thin or not well made, the glazing bone dry might not work for you, because when you dip it in the glaze, the water would soak into the piece and make the clay, if it's thin, too wet. But with the piece as thick as an Oreo cookie and put together with clay glue, I want to show you how strong this is, because a lot of teachers are hesitant to pick up a piece that's bone dry. But this has been made well, and it's very hard to break, and you can see that it's really, it's really well made and strong. So you don't have to worry about a Clay Lady project falling apart in your hands in the glaze. Now, my glaze is sold powder form. You add water in just the right amount. The glaze is going to be a little bit thinner than maybe some other glazes you're used to. The beauty of this glaze is you don't have to run it through a sieve or screen it after it's mixed. Once you add the water, you stir it up and you're ready to go. So I'm going to stir my glaze up. In our studio, we usually teach, well, I'll be honest, we teach full grade levels at a time, so between 80 and 100 kids. We have all the class on one board. We set the board next to the glaze, and we glaze the entire board, keeping that classroom together. I have a couple of pieces here. So this is my turtle project, and what we're going to do is we're going to dip this into the glaze. Now you can see the color now, and what's going to happen after it goes into the glaze, you'll still see the color for just a minute, and then it's going to dry, and it'll be a white crust all on the outside. I don't want to grab the piece like this or grab it by a piece that might break off. So I look for a place that if there was a little bit of a finger mark wouldn't show. So I'm going to grab on either side, dip him in the glaze, pull him out. And you can still see the color, but as it's drying, can you see how that white crust is completely covering up the colors? And now I'm going to set this here so it can dry the rest of the way. With wet fingers, where I touch it, I can dab here and I can dab. That helps take care of some of the fingerprints. Now, let's say we have kind of more of an awkward piece. This is my cat bird feeder. There's really not a good place to grab. I certainly don't want to grab it down here just in case the feet weren't securely attached. I can't grab it by the tail for the same reason. But what I can do, I'm going to put 2 fingers on the back here, just a little finger here on the edge of the mouth. I'm going to dip it into the glaze, pull it out, let that extra glaze run off. You can see how it's already starting to dry. And then I'm going to set my piece down for it to dry the rest of the way. And again, I'm going to just dab right there on the hand. Now, if you look here, you can see that my turtle's already able to be touched and held without the glaze messing up at all, but we can't have glaze on the bottom of the piece. So after you glaze all the pieces and they've had a chance to dry, which you saw didn't take very long at all, then you take a wet sponge, and I usually scoot the project across the sponge. That wipes the glaze off on any places that it's going to touch onto the kiln shelf. After you wipe it off, you can put it directly in the kiln. You don't have to wait for it to dry anymore. You can put it directly in the kiln. Usually with my projects, a full class can fit on one shelf. So in a kiln load, I can get 1 class per shelf. With the cat bird feeder, I can do the same thing. I can hold it gingerly, but then I can wipe it off on the bottom. And so this part that's going to be touching the kiln shelf, it's going to not stick because all that glaze has been wiped off. We don't have to worry about the glaze that stays in this, because that's not going to touch the kiln shelf, and Clay Lady glaze will not move in the kiln. Wherever it is, that's where it's going to stay. Now, after you put everything in the kiln, nowadays pretty much everybody has a computerized kiln, and so the kiln firing would be as this. After you put the projects in, shut the lid. And then you want to program a slow 05 cone firing, but you want to add a 2 to 4 hour preheat. 2 minimum, 4 if you're kind of questionable about if the projects are dry enough. Now a preheat will take the clay to 181 degrees, and then it just stops there until the preheat is over. Water turns to steam at 212 degrees. So a molecule of steam takes up 1,250 times the space as a molecule of water. So if there's water, even chemical water, trapped inside your clay, if it goes too hot too fast, what will happen is that water molecule gets really active, and that will blow your piece up. And so if you have pieces in your kiln where it's like little clay potato chips underneath, that means that you're firing too fast and your project was too wet to be fired. Now, if you have a piece that just breaks in half like this, like an egg, then it means there was an air bubble in there. But with the Clay Lady way, the kids make and paint. You let the project dry 7 to 10 days till it's bone dry. Dip it in a clear glaze. Fire it on a slow 05 with a 2 to 4 hour preheat. You won't have any troubles. If you have any questions about this process, feel free to email me off my website, theclaylady.com, or if you're ever in Nashville, come by and visit. We'll be glad to show you our studio, show you our setup, and also show you our kilns and how we program them.